Hello and welcome back to the Racing Riders Podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Crandall. This week's guest is Ben Kennedy, who gave up the steering wheel to become the general manager of the Camping World Truck Series, starting to put his boots on the ground with the family business. Some of what you're going to learn in this episode is what responsibilities Kennedy has during the week and then on race days, whether or not he could have kept racing this year, and what his long-term plan is now that he's on the business side of NASCAR. A thank you real quick to the NASCAR communications folks who helped make this sit-down happen last weekend at Pocono. Ben was awesome, of course. Also, thank you to Centire Media Podcast Network, who has become the host of the home, I guess you could say, of the Racing Riders Podcast. Through their help, you can now hear this episode and more on platforms such as Google Podcasts and TuneIn, and there's still more options to come. So iTunes, SoundCloud, and remember, all episodes are also being uploaded to YouTube. If you like what you hear today, please don't be shy about leaving a rating and review wherever you are listening. And now, let's get to the show. Here's my conversation with Ben Kennedy. So first off, how are you doing? How's life?
Good. Going well.
Different? Busy?
It's different. It's busy. It's going well, though. A lot going on right now.
Yeah.
So it's an exciting time, though, getting ready for the playoffs and everything for trucks.
Exactly. So yeah. Here at Pocono, I mean, what have you been up to already today? What is race day like for you when it comes to the truck series?
So race day, this is every weekend. It's always different, whether it's a one-day show or a two-day show. This one kind of being a two-day show. So, just kind of working with Brad Moran and the guys in competition. And then right after this, we'll go to the drivers' meeting, kind of kick that off, and then we have a pretty quick turnaround, so we grab a bite to eat real quick and then head up to race control for the race. So days like this move really quickly.
So you go up to race control and just kind of keep an eye on things? Do you have like a certain task up there, or? Not
necessarily. I think I just kind of help out where I can. So if, I guess I'm just another pair of eyes and ears that if, those guys get consumed with something else, I can kind of speak up and hopefully help them out.
So your title is still general manager, right, of the truck series? Is that what the official title is, or has that changed? I believe that's what it was announced.
Yeah.
So how does it feel now, I mean, a couple months in, to be Ben Kennedy, general manager of the truck series, and not Ben Kennedy, driver?
Yeah, it's different. It's really different. It's crazy because we all come to the track every weekend, and whether you're a driver on the team side or on the NASCAR side, or on the track side for that matter, we all come to the track kind of as one, really, but our lives are so different. When you show up as a driver, even if it's a truck race at Pocono, it's so much different than being on the NASCAR side, which is different from the team side and facilities XYZ. We all come together kind of as one on the weekend, but when we separate, it's a different lifestyle for sure. But I'm getting up to speed on it pretty well. I feel like thankfully I've got a decent amount of experience on it, whether it's the competition side in racing or team ownership side. I've had a team down in Daytona for a number of years, or just being around the sport for a long time. So the learning curve is, it's been big, but it hasn't been as big as I thought too.
Why is that? Did you have kind of preconceived notions or maybe expectations that you just came in thinking and you just said it's not what you thought it was going to be?
I think a lot of it is, most of it is what I thought it'd be. I think there's certain pieces and elements to it that, it's a very complex business. There's a lot of stuff going on, whether you're working with Brad Moran and the guys on competition, or the marketing side, or our TV partners, or our entitlement partners. There's so much going on that's, I've looked at everything at a very high level before I came into this role, and now you get very granular on whatever element it is. So all the way down to section 3BI of the rule book, we're looking at these little bits and pieces, and then you might have another conversation that's very high level. So it's just kind of sporadic and all over the place, but I enjoy it that way.
So you wrote on Twitter after the announcement came out that you called it the most difficult decision you've made. Just going back to that, why was now the right time to do it, and what went into the decision to make the change? It
took me quite a while to get to this point. I had been I've been thinking about it, I guess, for years, but not really taking it seriously. And I love the racing stuff. I still love the racing stuff. It's always been a passion of mine. And when I was racing, I wanted to go to the top. And I think it just kind of got to a crossroads. I could have continued racing this year, and I think I don't know if I had like overnight epiphany, but it was definitely several weeks and probably months of just constantly thinking about it and thinking about my long-term solution, and then this kind of felt like the right place and the right fit for me.
So did you have driving options? Going back to what you said, you could have kept racing.
Yeah, I had several, whether it was in trucks or Xfinity, and we had a bunch of partners that were ready to go and on board with everything, and we definitely could have made something happen in a competitive car or truck, but I kind of got to the point where I was ready to kind of make this leap. I think mentally more than anything, and it also still gives me an opportunity, like having the team down in Florida, to unleash my competitive edge a little bit, and maybe I can get in a late model sometime or something. So it's been good for me though, because I like staying busy. I like staying just running hard, like on the road all the time, and this could be a better role for that.
Yeah, because I was going to say, it's not like the competitiveness just goes away overnight, so you probably miss it a little bit, but you're happy, but you're still, there's still that edge there, probably.
There's still that edge. You still get like a little bit of a rush, just not as much as actually like being in the cockpit of the car.
So being a former driver, and you still have your team, does being a competitor, having been on the ground, boots on the ground, in a car, does that help you now in this role? Because you can bring what it's like to be in the garage, what you see, what it takes to be in this sport. Can you bring that to this role and kind of guide you in terms of what you feel would be best for the series because you have that experience?
I think so, and I hope so too. Being on the driver's side, you see this sport from such a different lens, and really all of your focus is on competing and being the best driver with the best team that you possibly can. And you always think about different ideas and concepts and whatnot. But kind of coming to this side I feel like I've been able to, apply some of that knowledge where it makes sense, but at the same time, some of the ideas that you have, you realize that it may not be feasible today. It may be in the long run, 2-3 years from now, it makes sense. But there's definitely different paths, and people have reached out to me on this side and it's been like, hey, what do you think of this from your driving background? And sometimes I have like a light bulb goes off, and I'm like, here's your perfect answer. And sometimes I'm just like, I don't really know. So I think it helps a lot, but at the same time, there's a lot of elements that go into everything.
Have you heard any feedback from the garage of what it's like now having you in this role? I believe I want to say it was Dale Jr. who isn't involved in the truck series per se, but I think it was on his podcast. He made the comment that he felt like you were doing a really good job. You were kind of fit for this role type thing. Have you heard any feedback in the truck garage of what it's like working now with those guys, how they feel working with you? Yeah,
I mean, I've heard positive feedback. Dale Jr., he reached out to me like right after I announced it. He's been fantastic. It's been great to see him in the booth on NBC. So that's been fun, and I know Denny Hamlin mentioned something last week as well. So it's neat to see the positive feedback. And the cool thing for me is like I've raced in the truck series for several years, and I know a lot of these people, just kind of throughout the garage. Just I was there every weekend. So and a lot of the guys, still working the truck series. Some of them work in Xfinity, and some work in Cup. So it's kind of neat and fun to kind of go around the garage and not only work with people I've worked with in the past, but meet new people and just hear them out more than anything.
You touched on it a little bit, but I wanted to go back to the business side of things. When you switch from driver to business as a whole, the sport as a whole, what are some of the things that you've been learning just in general about the, again, this is such a big business, it's a big sport. What's been maybe some eye-opening things that you don't think about as a driver that now you're kind of fully ingrained in this role?
I think for me, and my main focus kind of initially has been on the competition side, but just the the amounts of thought and processes that goes through everything. Sometimes, even as a driver, you'd look at a change and you wouldn't really think about it a whole lot. And, now, whether it's a decision we make, whether it's in the rule book, whether it's proactive or reactive, there is a ton of thought and due diligence that goes into each decision before we make a decision and make it public. So I think for me, that's kind of been the biggest eye-opening thing, is just everything that goes on at the R&D center kind of away from the track. And there's a process for everything, whether it's a penalty or infraction, or whether we need to make a change. So there's a lot going on in that department, and outside of that too, there's so many moving parts and elements with that. I don't know if I didn't realize that they weren't there, but maybe I kind of took for granted.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what about during the week? So during the week, what all do you have your hands on, so to speak? Like maybe what falls under your category of things that you're involved in, or things that is going on?
Yeah. So I think mostly it's been focusing on trucks. We worked on the schedule when that came out earlier this year, and a couple of the moves that we made. And then, working with TV partners, working with Brad Moran on competition on the truck side, and then various other projects I've been working on. International's kind of been a big pillar lately, and with our series in Europe and Canada and Mexico. So I've been busy with that, and
so not just truck stuff.
Not just truck stuff. Yeah, a little bit of everything. But it's been good for me because I get to kind of work with different people in different areas of the business. So I'm my main focus is trucks, but at the same time, I'm kind of getting a broader lens.
Is there something that you found you've enjoyed learning so far? Like maybe something you didn't think you were going to enjoy, and there's part of this that you're like, that's a lot of fun. I like being involved in this.
Yeah, that's a good question. I always enjoy the competition stuff, just because I feel like you can never learn enough there, and once you do, if you walk away from it for 2 weeks, you're kind of behind again. So that's always fascinating to me, because it's ever so dynamic. The international stuff has been a lot of fun, just because of the opportunity there. NASCAR is huge here in the United States, but you go to some of these other races, Brands Hatch, for instance, the NASCAR Europe Series had 50,000 people there. So just the number of magnitude. Mexico, they've got 50,000 people race. So there's definitely interest abroad as well. So I'm excited to work with our international team that they put together earlier this year as well, and just thinking about like the future. What does NASCAR look like 2, 3, 4, 5 years out?
Right.
And that's what everyone's really focused on right now.
So you keep bringing up international. It's kind of got my mind going now, because we do hear a lot about we're in Europe and all this other stuff. What do you see in terms of like our reach over there? It's obviously very successful, but in terms of like the fan interest and the engagement over there, is that something that is developing the way that the sport as a whole had hoped?
I think so. And in each territory, it's really a different style of racing, I guess. In Europe, it's probably more road courses and famously known racetracks like Brands Hatch and Hockenheim. And then Mexico, you've got Mexico City. Canada, you've got a ton of cool tracks up there, a bunch of oval tracks as well. So each one kind of is a little bit different in its own sense, and it's kind of fun to think about. So I enjoy it. I think I can almost kind of relate it to the competition side a little bit, because it's changing ever so much and so quickly, and it's dynamic as well. So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So what's cool, we've been running through some good stuff here. I've only got a few more things for you. So obviously, being Ben Kennedy, I mean, many people would be like, so is this do you envision this being like your long-term goal? Like, do you want to go bigger in terms of one day being the heir apparent to the sport? Is that something you think about in terms of you yourself within the company? Do you think about going up more and taking over more as the years go on?
Yeah, I think so. I think more than anything, I'm just focused on here and now, and working on the truck series and everything else that's going on. But I think it is part of my long-term plan, and I think it's part of the reason I made my decision, because I knew it was part of a longer-term plan. So
Get your boots on the ground now type thing.
Get my boots on the ground now. I can always learn a whole lot in the race car, and I learned a ton in the race car. And, I don't think I really realized it at the time what I was getting out of it. But now coming over this side, there is so many different elements of it where, a question comes up or we're trying to make a decision where I can think back if it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now, from an experience I had behind the wheel of the car or working with teams, that it's like, this would be so much more difficult for me to kind of, I guess, get caught up on if I didn't have that experience.
Right. All right, so we'll end it with this, Ben. So going back to what you said before about you kind of think big picture, like where NASCAR and trucks are going to be a few years down the road. When you came into this, did you have maybe a set vision or goals of what you would like to see or be able to kind of put your fingers on when it comes to the truck series? And again, looking down a few years down the road, do you have visions or goals for this series that you would like to be a part of making happen?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things, and I think there's things that you can do kind of individually as a series, but I also think there's changes that if you want to make it, it's got to be part of a broader vision in Xfinity and Cup series. So. And then, ARCA coming on board as well, there could certainly be some synergies between K&N and ARCA and possibly even trucks. Never bring them together, but,
But have your eyes on
synergies between, how the truck series worked with Xfinity and Cup. So I've got like a long list of ideas and concepts and really awesome. More than anything, goals. Some I was able to cross off in a couple weeks, and some I know is going to take 2 to 3 years. So each one is different in its own way, which makes it kind of fun.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Ben. Like I said, we ran through stuff quick, so that's awesome. So plenty of time to get to the driver's meeting and do your job. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.